All right, so hey guys, and welcome back to Personal Finance Rant. So today I'm really actually excited because this is one thing I really love, especially when people first start out, because when people first start out on their personal finances, most of the time, the reason they're sitting down and talking with someone like myself or Immanuel is because they've got themselves into some debt. And they, at the end of the day, if all you can focus on is debt, that pretty much consumes you. And for most people, that is the way of life, but it shouldn't be. And I think, the sooner you can get out of the focus of debt, I'm not saying get out of debt, because actually you'll find successful people are in debt, and probably a lot more debt than what you think. But it's the right type of debt and it has assets backing it. And to be fair, they've got strategies in which to, it's income producing and all those sort of things, So as you get more into this, you realize debt's not a bad thing, but for most people it is, because what they've done is they've got themselves consumer debt. And I think, the Rich Dad Poor Dad there's a great, book for that, to explain things about the mindset around that. So welcome, Immanuel. So today I'm quite excited. How about you, mate?
Yeah, I'm very excited. I'm very excited because this is all about my book. As well as yours, about showing people how to get out of debt. My strapline for my book, The 6 Steps to Financial Freedom, is talking about transforming debt into wealth, which is really quite important. So you take away, you do the transference from debt and you create the wealth. And the other part that you talked about, which is, what's the difference between good debt and bad debt? And people that understand debt properly in business realize that the main difference between good debt and bad debt is anything that takes money out of your pocket, and good debt is anything that puts money back into your pocket. That's the real difference. And people in business understand, if you borrow money, the money that you get back compared to the interest is much higher than you're paying. That's it.
Yeah. And when you realize that, you realize you can scale a business. In fact, I find it quite interesting, and it even tests my understanding or relationship with debt, because most of my businesses I don't build on debt. I build them out of the cash flows and the profits and things like that. My property portfolio is a little bit differently, but I've got mates of mine who have millions of pounds that they've borrowed. They haven't got a profitable business, but they're continually borrowing money to grow the business, and the business is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And for me, it's it's that sort of slow, steady growth and that sort of thing. Whereas I find, some people just have a totally different relationship to debt, and they can handle that, and they do handle that quite well. But I think for most people, we're probably not going to get into, we're not going to get into the business type debt today. We'll focus more on the personal type debt, which a lot of times is the credit cards and the auto loans and all the sort of store cards and things like that, which are generally the ones you get in trouble with. But once you sort them out and you understand how they work, you can actually turn a lot of these things into your favor. Which, like I use a charge card, which is something that's a credit card. It's like a credit card. I earn points on it, and then every month I have to pay it down to zero, which is the best type of card. And because of that, I put my business spending, I put lots of expenditure on there, and I get lots of points, which pays for my travel, a lot of my travel that I do, which is fantastic. But and I think debt is such a dirty word for most people. But one of the things you need to do is you've got to get a better relationship with the word debt. And I think I hope if you take something out of today, besides some of the strategy we're going to look at, is actually, about how to think about debt. Would you agree with that, mate?
Yeah, it's very much about mindset. It's about mindset. It's about discipline and having principles all around debt. And when you can manage those three, it's amazing how quickly you come out the other side. And like most things to do with money, it's a game. I often say to people, think of your money and your debt like Monopoly. Think of it as a board game, and the more fun you have, the more money you make.
And that's a common theme that we keep hearing through these sessions, is treat it like a game. And it's the best thing you can do. It really is. I mean, it's a serious game. You've got to do that, and you've got to be disciplined and that, but it's a game. It's fun. And when you're having fun, it's great. Interestingly, I think most people think you've got to get to zero debt before you can, be free of the beast, if you like. But what I find, and when I sit down and I put a plan out for people, I find that actually within 30 to 90 days, forgetting about how much debt they owe it's the refocusing on having some savings, having an investment, having a plan that actually frees people's mindset and frees them from the burden of the debt. Is that your experience too, mate?
It is my experience, but this is the real nub of it. For every pound that you clear of your debt, you automatically become wealthier. And people don't realize that. So you become wealthier as you pay down your debt because you owe less, so you have more. And the sooner you pay it off, the more money you have to then invest even further to grow your wealth even further. So every pound you pay off increases your wealth.
Yeah, 100%. And that really, there's some wisdom in that, obviously. But it is amazing because people are taught so much that debt is bad and that, they shouldn't talk about debt and they shouldn't, it's almost like it's shoved under the blanket and it's something that you don't really talk about with anyone. You just, suffer it. And that's probably the worst thing, because actually as soon as you start talking about it and asking advice about it and reading about it, you start to realize that there is ways to get rid of your debts a lot quicker, and there's strategies out there. And yes, you need discipline to apply them. It's funny. I was reading a book called Atomic Habits, and this is a couple of months ago, and we're actually talking about it today on a call with some of my mates. And one of the things he talked about was it's not the plan that actually you need to focus on. It's the habits, it's the discipline, it's what the change that you need to make. And actually that's the same with this finances is it's the change you need to focus on, not the end goal. The end goal, yes, might be to get out of debt, but it's the disciplines all the way along that if you change those habits actually will mean that you don't ever have to go into debt again. Because far too often, if you focus on getting out of debt, once you get out of debt, if you go back to your old habits, well, you're going to get back into debt again. And it does come down to a lot of habits. Yeah. Cool. So look, guys. So let's move into getting down to it. So actually, the first thing I'll say is this, and I'll just basically I'll show you. I'll share with you the screen, and basically, this is right now. If you want to learn about this process and this strategy and read some more about it, look, my book is more on property. Basically, Insider's Way to Financial Freedom with just 4 properties. But the reality is there's a whole chapter on there about debt, about getting the money that you need to get a deposit, which is about getting out of debt, one of those. And so that's a whole chapter. In your book, there's a whole chapter as well, dealing with this issue that we're talking about here. And it was interesting because before we came online, we were just chatting for the 5 minutes before, and I was just running through what I prepared the presentation. And so I was explaining it, and he's going, well, that's exactly the same in my book, or it's similar, this is a little bit different, or that's a little bit different. But it was basically the same concept, And so totally separately, we've come to the same result, which happens so often, on this when, I haven't, I'll be honest, I haven't read his book yet. I know I should, but the reality is I haven't read his book yet, but as we keep learning about bits and pieces, it's like, well, that's the same thing I'm doing. So totally independent, we've come at the same answer. So, there might be some wisdom in there and something that you can take control, thoughts about. Yeah. Cool. So actually that's what I was saying. If you want copies of those books, you can go onto my website, just go on to gladfish.com. Virtually every page has the ability to download my book free. And on your website, it's the 6 steps to financialfreedom.com.
That's it.
And pretty much, I think if you do /free-book is the actual URL, but you can get it on there. And the other thing is if you want to do the actual course, Immanuel has his actual course on there for free. So you can go through each of the chapters in detail and you can sign up for the course there. So that's quite good if you're interested in going a bit further in that. But that will be on Immanuel's website. Cool. So let's have a look. And what I'll do, so let's pre-frame this. So we talked about this week earlier about how to structure the pay. So you get your take-home pay. What do you do with it? And one of my structures was that 10% goes to the future, which is investment. 20% goes to the past, which is debts. Yeah, and then the 70% is on living. And Immanuel has the 50, 10, 10, 10, 10 going to various stages, a bit more detailed, a bit more modern, if you like. Because my way is sort of, back in the olden days, if you like. But it comes out of the richest man in Babylon. It's not mine. It's the richest man in Babylon's. But I think the interesting thing is that 20%. Yeah. So what do you do with this 20% now? You've got, and let's say your wage is $2,000 a month. Okay. So that 2,000, 20% of that is 400. So you've got 400 pounds or dollars or wherever you are to put towards your debt. So how do you divide that up? Okay. And that's what we're going to look at now. And I think, so one of the, so you mentioned 10% debt destroyer. So maybe just explain that to the guys.
Yeah, so I try to make things quite simple for people. So 10% is quite easy for most people to understand. So 10% of your income, if your average income is 2,000, you aim to put £200 a month towards your debt. And the first thing people always say is, I'm finding it hard to live on my existing income. How the hell am I going to find 10% saving from my income already? So I love those sort of challenges, and I talk through my book and how to make those different savings, and we'll go through that, where it's 10% or 20%, how you can make those savings immediately from your current expenditure to allow you to make that what we both call the snowball payment, to accelerate the payment to reduce their debt. So we'll cover that as we go through, but yeah.
So cool. So we'll look at that. So basically, if we go and effectively look at, so what we're going to do, the first thing you need to do is get a piece of paper out, or get it on an Excel spreadsheet or something like that, sheets on Google. And what you need to do is write down all of your debts. So in one column, write down all your debts, as you can see on screen. So that column one is the debt. Where is it? Is it a personal loan? Is it a, auto loan? Is it a credit card? Is it a store card? Is it a mortgage? Put your mortgages in there as well. All debt, if you put it in there. And there's a lot of method in this strategy, but there's also a lot of, once you recognize, they say, you can't manage what you don't measure. Well, by putting these things down, all of a sudden it's in view. You can focus on it. You can come up and solve it. So that's the first thing. Write down the debts. Then write down in the next column, okay, all of the balances owing, okay? And then the next column, the interest rates that you're paying. Now, you might have to go out and get your statements and all that sort of stuff. It is worth doing, because once you do this, you can start to see how effective it is and how this snowball effect that we'll talk about happens. Then the fourth column now is the minimum monthly payment. Now, that's not the monthly payment that you normally make, that you might make if you make overpayments and all that. That's just the minimum you need to make, okay? Because what we're going to do is we're going to work out which ones you pay the minimum on, the absolute minimum, and which ones you put extra money to. That's where that debt destroyer payment in Immanuel's thing, or where any extra money you've got goes towards that, okay? And so then all you do is you take the balance owing. So in this case, we've got the Cuddle personal loan, $8,712 you owe on it, and it's a 6.9% interest rate. For right now, forget about the interest rate, okay? All you do is you take the balance owing and divide it by the minimum monthly payment, yeah? And that's going to get you a figure. And if you do that for all of them, then what you're going to end up with is you'll end up, your Smile personal loan down the bottom will have 22, the XYZ credit card is 21.7, the SA mortgage will be 208, okay? And you can see those numbers there. Now what you've done by doing that, you're now all we're going to do is go to the lowest number. Now the lowest number in this case is XYZ credit card. So what you're going to do is you're firstly going to pay the minimum on all of those cards, okay? So basically you make the minimum payment, because you're going to have to do that to keep your credit intact, and the bank's going to require that. But if you've got extra money, and whether that be through decreasing your spending, or maybe, because remember, this is, in my case, 20% of your income is going towards this. So in this case, the 2,000, let's say it's 400. Yeah. Although in this case, the actual figure comes to, I've added it up. The minimum monthlies are, what were they? 1,340 pounds. Now let's say, you earn, £3,000 a month. Okay. So £3,000 a month, sorry, it would be, 1,340 is that. But let's say you had 1,500 to spend. Okay. So 1,500 was your 20%. All right. So then what you do is you take your 1,500 minus your 1,340, which is the minimum monthlies, and then you got 160 left over. So that 160, you then add that to your XYZ credit card and pay it off. All right. Now, one of the key things with this is you do not keep spending on the credit cards. Yeah. So you've got to get these. And if that means you go to your freezer and you put it in a glass of water and you freeze it in the fridge, or you used to be able to do this in the old days before you had these defrosting ones, but I used to be able to grab the credit card and rub it against the fridge's wall, the freezer's wall, and it would freeze to the edge of the thing. Whatever, get rid of it. Don't spend on it, because this will fail dismally if you don't maintain not using your credit cards. So bottom line is you're now putting 138 plus 160 towards that particular thing. And look, so if we have a look now, what you're going to see is you're going to see the first one to pay off is at 21.7. The second one is the Smile personal loan, which is at 22. So what I do is I now have 3,000. I'm now putting 138 plus 168, which is 298. Okay. So let's say 300 per month. So in 10 months, I've now paid that first credit card off. Yeah. So what do I do now? I now simply go and I can either recalculate at that stage because we're another 10 months down, but it's likely to come out the same. I then put the 191 that I pay off the Smile credit personal loan, plus the 298 extra that I'm not paying on the XYZ credit card, I put towards the Smile personal loan. So now I'm putting about 400 a month to the Smile personal loan. So it takes, let's say, 5 months to get rid of that. Now I've got that 400. I now go to the third one. So now we're talking the Cuddle personal loan, which is up the top. So I'm putting 250 plus now 400. Yeah. So I'm now putting 650 a month towards this. And this is the snowball effect. And as you snowball, you're going to see amazing things happen. And this is the fastest way to pay down your debts. Yeah. Mate, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, a few things. So the first thing is human nature. So human nature is when you pay off a debt, doesn't mean you need to replace it with a new debt. So that's what often happens. Somebody clears a loan or a credit card, they immediately replace it with a new loan, a new debt, because they think they have their money available. The beauty of the snowball effect, it allows you to accelerate your payments to become debt-free. So what happens, and in your example, in both our example, the total amount of payments that they're paying in total is around about £1,500 a month. So if you can imagine that £1,500 a month that you're not paying each and every year on debt, that's 18,000 a year, you can buy things for cash. You can use that money to invest in. So it gives you the freedom. And more importantly, the biggest debt is the mortgage, and people tend to forget about the mortgage, and they tend to refinance on a regular basis. And instead of, clearing their mortgage well before their retirement age, a lot of people now have their mortgage into their 70s. If you can clear your mortgage 10 or 15 years earlier by using this method, and you have another £18,000 a year to spend on yourself, on your finance, on your family, to create a better life while you're young enough, that's where it really comes into its own. So that's why I'm really passionate about that. So people understand it's not just the short term, but it really is the long-term benefit and how your life changes dramatically if you become completely debt-free at a much earlier age.
Yeah, and I think it is, the number of people I've spoken to over the years who are so focused and so burdened by this debt, and often it's credit cards or auto or whatever it is. And a lot of times it's stuff they bought, and for the day or two after, it felt really good. But then, unless they bought something else as the next fix, eventually they just end up in this debt burden, and they don't know any way out. And, it's interesting. One of the stories I've got is, so I used to have a 19-year-old work for me. And so taught this stuff, and, and they were around a lot of this because, we talk a lot of this, the guys that work for me and that, a lot about this stuff. And I train this in my staff, and I get them to put that discipline in place. And so she'd come to me at 19 and basically said, okay, so I've got all this debt, and she admitted to it. And, she was in the typical situation that you'd expect from a 19-year-old who'd been given by, most people's terms, I think she had $2,000 worth of a credit card. But for her at 19, that was a huge amount of money, So, and she said, I don't know how I can possibly buy a property. But interestingly, I got her to track her expenses for 30 days, got her to go through the whole process, and she did it. And you know what? At 22, she bought her first house. At 22. Now imagine how many of you guys are listening that are after 22 and you still haven't got your own house. Imagine what it would feel like to have a house with no debt at 22. Yeah. It's an amazing feeling. And when you start doing this, and, even when you start rolling and snowballing that, from 200 to 400 to 650 per month, and you're like, wow, I'm paying this down so quick. That's bloody exciting. Then it doesn't matter how much debt you've got, because you can just see it going down and down and down, and that you're on top of it. It makes an amazing change, Anything to add, mate?
There's a couple of things I want to add to that. So in terms of the spending, so this is what science has shown, that when we go to buy something, the euphoria, the endorphins that you get is at the point when you're shopping. It goes down by over 80% after you've made the purchase. So if you want to get that feeling, you go window shopping, you try the stuff on, you have a look at it, but leave your credit card at home. You'll get the same feeling. It's scientifically proven. Don't believe me? Research it. Look it up. That's what happens in terms of how we feel when we're about to buy something or look at something. We get that feeling at that moment in time. But when we go home, how many times you bought something, never even used it, right? So it's at the point of purchase or just before. So that's quite important that people understand that part of the mechanism.
Yeah. So, and we've talked about this before, where I have a thing. I use a sleep test where basically for pretty much all my life, and it did increase over time, but I used to have a $300 boundary where anything below 300, I don't mind going out and spending. I don't have to think about it. It's guilt free. Anything above 300, I had to stop, and I could do everything but buy it. Try it on, talk about it. Yes, that's the one I want. And, sometimes these salespeople would think they'd had the sale because I was so excited about it. And then I would have to go home and sleep on it and come back the next day to get it. And it's amazing how much money I have saved in my life, where using that sleep test, that simple sleep test, and having the discipline to do it. Then you sleep on it, you wake up the next morning and think, you know what, actually, I probably don't need it. It's ego that wants me. It was the excitement. And it saves so much time. So stuff like that, it's really simple to do, when you do that. And I agree, go and act as if, but most of the time, and I still do it these days. I've got the camera, which, it's not the camera we're using, but just one it's sitting back there now. And it's, it's HD, it's not 4K, but I was like, I should upgrade to a 4K. And then there's these mirrorless ones, and then there's this, and it's like mirrorless is, $3,000 for this one that I want to look at getting, or I can get the DSL, which is like 1,600, or I can keep using what I've got. And I was sort of sitting there going, I'm at the airport, I can get 10% off for my travels. But you know what? In the end, I was like, you know what? There's nothing wrong with what I've got. It's perfect. It's fine. It's HD. And the stupid thing is most of the time I'm sitting here looking at a Logitech, desktop HD one, and that's what I'm using. And yeah, it's not perfect, and sometimes it doesn't, do things correctly, but it's so easy. It's always attached, and I think you've got to go through these things, because part of the reason we get into the debt is because we don't make good decisions. So it's good to deal with the decision side as well as having the structure to get out of this, because if you don't deal with those decisions, you end up just replacing old debt for new. Yeah.
Yes, I've got a couple of bits to add to that. So I've borrowed a mantra that I've used from somewhere else. So it's a mantra whether you have money, whether you don't. If you're limited in your resources and money, then you have a mantra that goes like this: can I afford it? If the answer is no, you don't buy it. Secondly, am I going to use it? If the answer is yes, or if it's no, you don't buy it. And the third question is, have I checked if it's cheaper elsewhere?
Yeah.
If you haven't said yes to all of those, then you don't buy it. That's the first thing. So if you're limited in budgets, the first question is, can I afford it? Am I going to use it? Have I checked if it's cheaper elsewhere? The other mantra, if you do have more disposable income, is you still say, have I checked if it's cheaper elsewhere? first and foremost. If the answer is no, you don't buy it. Am I going to use it? If the answer is no, then, or do I really need it? The answer is no, you don't buy it. Now, if you're still not able to control yourself, I do something which I said you've touched upon, is you get your credit card, you put it in a glass of water, you stick it in the freezer. If you see something that you like, by the time you come home, if it's defrosted and you still really want it, then you can buy it. And all of those things are just giving you small disciplines to control your spending habit. That's all. And you can make it fun at the same time.
Yeah. It's amazing, you know, and I've been doing this for ages, and I know you have too, but it's amazing how many times you give examples and I'm like, funnily enough, that's in my book, or funnily enough. It's amazing. And I guarantee if we got another 4 or 5 guys who are in similar sort of situations, that we would have the similar stories. And part of that is because, you know, we probably read really widely, and so we get a lot of diffused information towards us. But then the other side is we've taken a lot of that information, personalize it, and make it our own and use it, you know. And so, you know, none of the things we're talking about here are things that we don't do or haven't done or don't continue to do. Because I think the mistake a lot of people make is that they think that you get to a point where money just isn't an issue anymore. You know, that you don't have to think about buying. You don't have to, you know, actually, I know lots of wealthy guys who went on spending sprees and were dishing out, you know, it was $50 tip here and, you know, let's buy another bottle of champagne while we're out drinking. And you sit there and go, I know his business. It's doing well now, but it's not doing that well. And sure enough, it might be 2 or 3 years down the track, and all of a sudden you don't hear from them anymore. And then you find out that what happened was they were spending, you know, overspending. So this is not something that you stop doing. This is something that you take forward with you. Well, as far as I know, your whole life, you know. I mean, you're a few years older than me, only a few, but I imagine, you know, you're still talking about it. So I imagine in a few years' time, I'm going to be talking about it. And, you know, and in fact, most of my mentors, which are even older than, you know, both of us, they still talk about it too. You know, it's a lifelong discipline.
It is lifelong discipline. It is basic principles and adhering to it. Like most things that you do on a consistent basis, you know, as we've talked about before, I like to go to the gym on a regular basis. I can't do that, but I work out every single morning. So it's a routine. It's things that you do consistently. You'll get the same results over and over again. And you're right. It's, you know, a lot of the stuff that we do, we've seen, heard elsewhere, we've made it into our own, but the basic principles are the same. So, you know, one of the analogies I like to give when it comes to finance is to look about your health. When you have something wrong with your health, you'll go to the doctor, you'll go to a specialist, you'll ask for help to make your health better. But when it comes to your finances and your wealth, people don't know where to go. Well, there's lots of people like you and me are there to help them get back on track where they need to be. In the same way a doctor would give a pill, we're giving the right advice and the right structure to get back to where they need to get themselves wealthy and healthy in their finances again. So those are the bits. And one of the things I've talked about in 1 or 2 of my videos is that people treat their finances like that river in Egypt. What's that river called? It's called denial. They're in denial of their finances. They're in complete denial because they don't look at their finances. They don't look at it in the way that they should do. And that's no different to people that don't eat healthily. They're in denial. They don't look at something and they don't get the results that they need to. We just want to help people as much as we can to make them understand and make finances fun. It is fun. And when you improve your finances, you can improve all the finances around the people around you because you can show them.
Yeah. Interesting. So I talk about, you know, stop being a victim, get out of bed. And what I mean by that is a lot of people have victim consciousness around, you know, their finances. In other words, you know, what can I do? I can't help it. I'm not rich. I'm not wealthy. If I had this, that's all victim consciousness. But then I talk about bed, which is blame, excuse, and denial. You know, and it's interesting that, you know, you're saying denial. Well, you know, same thing. You know, they're quick to blame something external to them for their misfortunes. You know, they're quick to come up with excuses as to why this is the case. I mean, I had a case, this is probably 2 years ago, where one of my mates was doing it tough. He called me up and said to me, he said, "Oh, I need to borrow 10 grand because this has happened, that happened. This has happened in his business. He was doing, relationship had happened." And I said, "That's fine." I said, "Well, what I need is your income. I need your expenses. I need assets, and I need your liabilities, and I need 6 months bank statements, and I'm happy to lend you the money." And then he went on to a bit of a tirade about why I didn't need that information to give him the loan. And it's kind of like, and the reason, and I ask that for anyone who asks me money, and it's amazing, that will filter probably 95% of people out, because what I'm asking them to do, expose their issues, their problems, and a lot of times actually giving them the 10 grand or whatever that is, 2 grand, or, it's probably not for a beer or something like that, it's a bit more. But the reality was, if they're asking for a loan, I will ask them that because I want to see what their habits are. And having those things, I can very quickly identify, actually, do you know what your issue is? You spend too much money. I mean, one time one of the guys sent it through, and I could see every single day he was leaving work and going via, what's it called? Not Betfair, Betfair. Is it Betfair? Betfair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Betfair, yeah, in the UK. And literally every day there was $40 that he was spending. Now you might go, actually, that's not too bad, $40. But when you think there's 21 days in a month, that adds up to a lot of money, and here they're asking me for a loan, and yet they're betting that money. But I'll tell you, the stories they can tell you about the times they've won, but they can't tell you any stories about the times they've lost. So there's all this sort of stuff. You've got to be really careful about that. And that leads into just one final point that I'll make, is that there are people out there that will help you, and there's a lot of people that will help you, and there's a lot of good people out there. But by the same token, there's also a lot of people that disguise education, mentorship, support. Actually, what it is, it's salesmanship disguised. So you actually have to be open to the fact that there could be an ulterior motive, in the reason they're helping you or offering you help. I mean, this happens all the time. I used to see it all the time with the seminars where, there'd be a free seminar, and then the free seminar would say you up to the weekend, which would give you all the answers. And then when you got to the weekend, you get to the mentorship group, and and vice versa. So you've got to be aware of these sort of things, because you can end up in more debt, thinking that you're actually learning how to get out of debt. Yeah. But that's probably another topic for another topic.
Definitely a whole nother topic.
Yeah. But good. Mate, I'm done. How about you? Anything else?
I'm done. I love this subject. I love talking about this. I love helping people around this area. It's a fun area once you get to grips with it. The fact that you and I have us, so similar in so many different areas is just amazing. And it just proves, even without talking about it, those are the principles. It's the same principles. You're in Singapore, you're from Australia originally, I'm in the UK. But the way that we think, the way that we act, the way we relate around money and around debt is identical. So
yeah, very much.
That should give people some comfort to know that these principles do work wherever you are.
Yeah, 100%. And they do, so yeah. No, all right, guys. Well, thank you very much. We'll have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Take care.
All right, guys. See you. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.